Okay. If I can get this to work. Oh. That big. Okay. Hello, my name is Madison Sumner, and I chose to do my experiment on the fermentation of yeast and sugar, one of the easiest processes of fermentation in my opinion. Super easy and cheap to buy materials. So what is fermentation exactly? It's a metabolic process that converts sugars into either acids, alcohol, or gases. In this case, my experiment is turning into a gas. It's turning into carbon dioxide. And this occurs in things like bacteria, yeast, and other microorganisms, and as well as oxygen mussels. So the fermentation of yeast and sugar, the yeast eats the sugar, and once it's doing that, it releases energy from the sugar through respiration. And after this occurs, the more sugar that you add, the more the yeast has to eat and the more that it's producing off CO2. And if you look down here, you can kind of see a breakdown of the fermentation process, bringing in like respiration and the Krebs cycle and everything that we've learned so far through biology. So for my experiment, I traveled to Hobby Lobby and I got a few glass jars. You can use plastic jars if needed. I got sugar that I already had, and then I just purchased a little pack of some rapid rise yeast and some balloons. You'll also need warm water and obviously measuring utensils so that everything is being distributed equally. So this is my step 2. So what I did was I emptied out each 2 ounce and 1/4 packet of yeast into each. And in the very first one, which is probably over here on your screen, is going to be my negative control. It is yeast only. There's no sugar for it to eat on, so I know it is not going to produce any CO2. There will be no fermentation occurring. In the middle is my experimental. And I only added about maybe a half a tablespoon or so of sugar to see exactly how much sugar does it need to produce CO2. And my positive control, I know is going to produce CO2 because I put 3 tablespoons of sugar, lots of sugar for it to feed off of, more than the amount of yeast actually. Step 3 is when I add equal parts of warm water into each container. Having it warm speeds up the process rather than putting cold water in there. And my results turned out like I thought they would. So my positive control that had the most sugar created the most CO2. And this is after about 4 hours of sitting and creating carbon dioxide. They're still sitting outside. I'm sure it'll get even bigger throughout the day. And if you'd like to see those, I'd be happy to post those too. The middle would be my experimental, where I only added a small amount of sugar to see how much CO2 it would produce. And obviously my negative control produced no CO2. It was just a mixture of the yeast and water. So there was nothing to fuel that yeast for it to grow and produce CO2 through fermentation. I really enjoyed this experiment and thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. Oh, I'm still recording.